we had a discussion about that.
But what I'm just saying is that were that true, then is what made my decision upon.
Okay, so we're gonna go with 2 yards. So that's gonna be our first change. I didn't have problems with anything else until we got down to the definition of temporary. Anybody else have any comments on anything prior to that in the definition?
Yes, actually. Under recyclable materials,
Yes.
section, there is a placeholder piece of text for the section. The section should be G.
Not X.
Yeah.
No, there is no section X. You can remove the brackets. I was using that as placeholder text because at the time I wrote the definition, I wasn't sure which sections would be ordered how. But now that it's completed, I must have missed it on a second run through.
I have to say, I was looking for X.
Yeah, no,
I gave up.
Recycled materials is section G.
Gotcha.
But D is in Dan.
Yeah.
G.
Oh, geez.
G is.
G is in green.
G, are good.
All right, so if nobody has anything prior to the definition of temporary, we sort of had a brief discussion on this before. We're talking about people doing renovation projects, et cetera.
I actually did something.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tom, please.
Only a note that I made before, just in looking at the definitions for household waste and solid waste.
Okay,
From a general perspective, maybe not so much the definitions themselves, but just as a note, if these need to be better distinguished throughout regulations, because I got a little confused between household waste and solid waste
okay.
and breaking that up.
Right.
Did they seem similar? Anyone here?
Well, I'm reading household waste, and when it says non-hazardous solid waste as things that aren't included in the definition of solid waste, and they're generated by a residential property and or household versus the solid waste could be generated,
More on the commercial side.
right. Along with, obviously, we wouldn't allow them to be collecting, I believe it says cesspool or other human waste.
Animal remains, construction material, demolition material, hazardous material, oils, paints, blah, blah, blah. But the fact that it says all rubbish is a little tricky.
Okay.
That's right. All rubbish, trash,
Garbage.
So I mean, I would,
Only generate.
Seemed like some cross meaning
Correct,
between
yeah.
both of those. That's what I was counting.
because I mean, we always call household waste rubbish.
Yeah, and the rubbish man is here.
That's right.
Dan, any
Yeah.
comments on those 2 definitions?
Yep. The purpose of separating out these two is because it's my understanding that a lot of licensed haulers will haul household waste separate from other forms of waste. Solid waste is defined herein specifically so that you can so that there's an opportunity to indicate what substances are excluded. It's kind of strange. The reason why solid waste is put into these regulations is specifically to define everything it isn't, rather than what it is. That's why the statement all rubbish, trash, garbage, or refuse is deliberately broad, because the entire rest of that paragraph is just to specify everything that the state defines as not valid solid waste. Household waste is defined separately because companies that haul trash will typically have that separated out as a separate service. So therefore it's defined separately.
Gotcha.
Got it. I saw that now.
Okay, good to proceed.
Good to proceed.
All right, so we get to temporary. Again, we already kind of discussed this a little bit. We're gonna revisit it. A period of time no greater than 30 days. I definitely felt that 30 days was too short. In a world today where someone is gonna do a renovation project and they're going to have a temporary dumpster at their home, 30 days is not a reasonable amount of time to get something done with all the delays that we know exist in today's world. So I felt the initial period of time to define temporary should be at least 60 days.
I put that down the last time I did this.
Tom, what's your opinion on that?
I agree with 60.
All right, Jack?
Agreed.
Dan, what's your thought on 60 days?
I think, sorry about that. I think that your argument makes perfect sense. 30 days is what the regulations written 10 years ago said, but that was before shortages, delays, the modern day changed. So 60 days is more appropriate in this climate.
Thank you. So that would be the next change, would be to go to 60 days.
Yep.
All right. Now, the next paragraph, D, general. Any comments, changes that anybody would like to see in that paragraph?
On number 4, I'm assuming that I'm changing X to G again.
Oh, there you
Correct.
go.
All right.
I didn't know if on number 1, do we need to incorporate the phrasing of household waste? Also, in addition to solid waste, because we have a difference of definition or no?
Well, no, because the definition of solid waste.
Yeah.
All rubbish, trash, garbage, or refuse normally generated. Excluding all those other things.
Solid waste construction.
Well, it
To be
says,
clear, household waste doesn't have to be excluded, because household waste can be processed at the same time as other forms of solid waste. It's just that I know some dumpster companies will separate out for convenience or pricing, not so much because there's a health or safety issue.
saying it's okay to commingle household waste, is that what you're saying?
With other solid waste, correct.
Hmm.
So which means that household waste falls under that category then.
Household waste is always a category of solid waste. The only reason why it's called out as a separate thing in the definitions is because I believe it does get referenced at a later point in these regulations. And because in some instances they might be collected separately, but they do not have to be collected separately.
So this would.
But they can't be stored in the same, they can be collected separately, but they can't be put in the same dumpster. Like you can't put solid waste and recyclables, right, in the same dumpster.
Correct.
And isn't that what that's saying?
No. So household waste is different from recyclables.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
correct.
And this
So-
would,
Thing.
yeah, this would prevent the situation like we had up on Inman Hill Road. This would spell it out that if you have a dumpster on your property and you're doing C and D, you're not gonna be putting your household trash in that dumpster.
Correct.
So this is covering that base. This is also making sure that things that are recyclable are being recycled.
So you can't put the recyclables in with the general trash.
Correct.
Correct.
Any other comments on section D, general?
Nope, not in the T.
Okay, so we just have that one change of the X to a G. All right, let's move on to the next section, permitting. I had a couple of comments on this. I'll proceed. See what we get. In the meantime, anybody else wants to chime in? Let's see here. I went down to D. I didn't think D was necessary. I know in the past, we've talked about identifying the vehicles that a septic hauler was going to use. And in some cases, there's just too many vehicles to list. Some of these bigger companies like a Wind River, et cetera. So I didn't really feel it was necessary to know all about every collection vehicle. So I was willing to omit D completely. And also G. I thought it was going to be too restrictive as of the smaller companies to require all those statistics on a quarterly basis. I didn't feel it was necessary to get to that level right now. And then I had a question on F. What is a revenue enforcement protection form?
The REIT is basically, we currently have it in our application now. And it goes to the Department of Revenue to make sure the company is up to date on its taxes and pays its taxes, and it's in good standing of its tax responsibilities.
Okay, so I'm good with that. So like I said, on section E permitting, I was willing to omit D and omit G. And I was happy with everything else except for, I see another change. Not sure. On a non-refundable permit fee as outlined in section E. Just check that. Section E.
Trash hauler's permit.
Okay. All right, so we just need to get rid of that X, that placeholder. And everything else is fine. So that's my take on.
The X section actually refers to the subsection that specifically requests a fee, which I believe sections is actually E6. So the placeholder X should be 6. Because that's what asks fees for dumpster permits are determined by the board.
Okay, thank you. So that should be 6 instead of an X or an E6.
In addition, there was something that came up before we move on from this section. Currently, and this is my bad, your permit does require that they provide you with a list of, basically a list of all their customers and the address where services are provided. That's currently on your hauler application, and this, while I agree that it's probably not relevant to ask them for their tonnage. That's really something more for a larger town. You probably do want to know at least how many dumpsters and where their dumpsters are, that there actually are. And the reason for this is we've had instances where in other towns where basically the dumpster company would discontinue service in a certain location, and then continue renewing their trash hauler permit year by year, and then nobody notifies us until the dumpster overflows much later. And being able to reference and find out that, oh, this person doesn't have a registered license with doesn't have a registered dumpster with a licensed trash hauler, it kind of helps us enforce things a little easier. Also, this would make it consistent with what your permit has already been requiring for years and years.
Okay, so Dan, let me understand this. Are you suggesting that we add that in, like
Yeah.
in place of G?
Yeah, you can add it in place of D if you'd like,
G.
Well, either one.
Either one.
whichever.
I mean, they'll end up getting re-lettered if we eliminate some of them, but, so we're gonna take the same requirement that we have in our trash hauler, and we're just gonna list it here that it's part of the requirement, so that it's also in our dumpster regulations. They only have to provide it to us once. All right, so that's what we're gonna do. So let's just say that we plug it in D. Keep it simple. All right, so that's gonna be a list of dumpsters serviced in town. So however that is worded on our trash hauler application is how we'll word it in that section.
Mhm.
Okay. You're doing that. If we turn the page, I didn't think it was necessary to find out, have them report to us the types of waste receptacles offered.
Which one?
I'm looking at 3I. Top of the page. Page 3.
So the reason for this is to determine whether or not, because by definition, anyone that is a licensed trash hauler may also provide C and D dumpsters without getting an additional permit. So the purpose of J there is to specify, are you also, like, if you are a trash hauler, are you just providing solid waste disposal, or are you also providing C and D?
Okay, thank you for that clarification, and thank you for correcting me that that is J.
Oh, it might be I, it's hard to see here.
I don't know,
Oh.
jail.
It is I,
Okay,
even though my eye is failing me, it is an I, okay. So we stand corrected, so we'll let section I stay, now that you've explained it to me, thank you. The next thing I'm seeing is 4A.
That's also another E6.
I believe so. Dan?
yep, I believe that's correct.
Okay, so that would be a 6. And then let's see, type of permit requested temporary may be renewed for an additional 30 days. So if we're already setting it at 60 days, if they go over that, we're gonna let them renew for another 30 days. And then I didn't see a need for an additional payment or an additional fee. They should just file the application, the paperwork, that they need more time. Any comments on that?
Well, they're probably charging their customer though, an additional.
Right, but they're charging them more rent. But I didn't feel there was an additional cost to the Board of Health to give them 30 more days for that extension. Now, obviously, after that extension is over, they gotta go back to start and start over again. Application, minimal fee, and they get 60 days. But I didn't think it was unreasonable to let them apply for an additional 30 days. They might be halfway through the kitchen and decide they want to do the bathroom adjacent to the kitchen at the same time. And I didn't see the need for an additional fee. We're always trying to cover our expenses, not necessarily make money. Any comments on that? Dan?
So this is conditional a little bit on how you manage your permitting software. So if the renewal process requires somebody to go into, say, Viewpoint Cloud and approve it, that's going to require time on behalf of your administrative staff that could be used for something else. So technically speaking, you could be using it as a justification for payment of time used by administrative staff in order to kind of verify and approve the additional paperwork. That having been said, because that's a much lesser expenditure of time than doing, the full permit from scratch, I would recommend that whatever additional fee you impose be incredibly minor. I do think that you should impose some fee. Otherwise, what's the point of having an extension option? Why not just give everybody 90 days? Like, if you're going to have administrative staff have to do additional work, you should make the residents pay for that work. Otherwise, just grant it by default. Why require additional paperwork if that's something that somebody can get for free as a service?
Any comments?
Well, what would be the scope of the added work? Yeah,
And work would be going in and
Doing another room.
gonna be basically changing the date. I guess reviewing the paperwork, making sure everything was in hunky-dory condition the first time. Making sure they're not asking it, or after it's already expired, like 2 weeks after the first one already expired.
or wouldn't that be like a normal administrative task that would be covered with the salary?
Uh, I would say yes.
I would not be in favor of an additional fee. Myself, but
I think if we set the initial fee correctly, I think we should be able to cover it. I think the initial fee, we can set it, and I think it'll still be a reasonable amount of money.
I mean, if there was an element of an added scope of work above and beyond what's normally done in the office,
Mhm.
then maybe I could say, okay, this is why the added fee. In my mind, I don't see if that's the case, to be honest with you, unless you could push me in a different
I
direction.
mean, this is for a temporary dumpster.
Right, and sometimes what that does is it makes them stay within the limit. It makes them stay within what
Right,
they,
we know that unfortunately in today's world,
Again, what's preventing them from having it for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months?
well, because we're telling them after the first 30-day extension, they gotta start over.
So we
Oh,
basically,
so they get one-
so we
They
seem to
get
be,
one 30-day extension.
seems like we're capping it at 90.
Okay,
And then once you get the 60, then we're gonna potentially give you 30.
Yeah.
But I think that should be based on board approval, right?
We could say that.
Only because I'd kind of like to know what have you been doing in the previous 60 days? So to kind of justify the add 30.
All right, so if we
Sometimes in
say,
the construction world, like you were going to it, you have delays. Contractors sometimes, you have the best laid plans of mice and men. Something happens, weather, whatever. So not to kind of put a pinch on a resident for something out of their control. I think it's nice we're offering an additional 30 days. But then beyond that, I guess in general, I'd probably raise the question, is it reasonable to assume that whatever they're going to go, whatever their endeavor is going to be, would it always happen within 60 and 90 days? Should it always happen within 60 to 90 days?
well, I would hope if someone's doing a kitchen or bathroom, there's a time constraint. Most houses only have one kitchen. so.
I mean, I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as bathrooms go, I mean, most houses have multiple bathrooms, but if you have a family, you're not gonna let the contractor down your bathroom for 90 days.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's reasonable. Well, that's,
Yeah, no,
you know what I'm saying?
so, all right, so if we get rid of and payment of additional fee and we put per board approval,
Yeah, I think we should incorporate the approval part for the added 30. I don't think we should make it an automatic.
well, and
Because
I
I
like
want to
that.
know, I want them to come before the board after 60 if it hasn't been, you know, if they're still needed.
Right.
Can you explain why you need it? What's the
But
justification?
I like that, because that gives us the option that if it's been a problem dumpster,
I think there might be some confusion here. The temporary dumpsters are still obtained by the hauling company, not by the property owner. So an extension, so a hauling company would apply for an extension at the request of their client.
Mhm.
So
So
it's the company that has to come before us to explain, not the
Yes.
resident?
yes,
Right.
well, they don't necessarily have to appear in person.
No,
They just have to make a written
Request.
request.
It doesn't have to be.
But I mean, if it's been a problem dumpster and they want another 30 days, at least it gives us an opportunity to say, hey, listen, this dumpster's been a problem. What's going on? And I mean, on a temporary dumpster, I could see, and I may be wrong, but I want to redo my kitchen. I call JR Dumpster Company, who's permitted in town, and say, drop a 30-yard dumpster at my house. I'm redoing my kitchen. Wouldn't I be applying for the dumpster, the temporary dumpster permit?
You're asking Dan that question?
Yes, Dan, I'm sorry. Dan, what do you think of that?
that depends. Every town does that differently. In Reading, that was the case, though I should specify that in Reading, all dumpster applications were done by the property owner, regardless of whether it's temporary or annual. And if that happens, rather than dealing with a business, you're going to be dealing with private individuals, which is much harder to keep track of, much harder to track down, much harder to enforce. So typically, even temporary dumpsters would tend to be, especially in smaller towns like this, would be done by the specific haulers. And the reason why temporary C&D dumpster permits might be better than, say, just getting an annual C&D dumpster permit and giving out however many dumpsters as you want is there are instances where haulers might just not be doing that much business in your town. It might be more economic for them to get 1 or 2 temporary permits because that's all the business they're going to see in that region per year, than to go all out and do all the paperwork required for a full annual permit and also pay for that. So this is conditional. A temporary C&D permits would likely be, I would suggest charging a smaller fee. Just to allow certain businesses to basically rent out 1 or 2 or 3 dumpsters a year. I'm given to understand from conversations in Northbridge that that is a thing that happens. I don't know how often, but it is.
How much is our annual dumpster permit for a company?
I believe it's something else here.
Yeah, so we're only charging 100 a year for a company to be licensed in Mendon.
As a hauler,
Yeah.
you currently do not have the dumpster permit that's outlined in these regulations.
It's the whole, yeah. But are people getting dumpsters from approved trash haulers in Mendon, or can they get anybody?
Well, they're not supposed to, any trash hauler that isn't licensed in Mendon is not supposed to drop a dumpster. in
Right.
Mendon.
So it has to be from a approved licensed.
Right.
Trash.
So this would be, this dumpster fee, in my opinion, for a temporary dumpster would be an additional fee so that we can keep an eye on these temporary dumpsters, not the dumpsters that are drop dead businesses and people on.
Can you repeat that about the statement you said about not supposed to?
If you don't have a permit in town,
You know, you're talking about the company.
The company, yes.
right,
Okay.
they're not supposed to drop a dumpster.
Okay, yeah.
Because we've had those issues before.
Yeah.
Where we've called the companies. If, you know, AJ saw a dumpster or you saw a
Yep.
dumpster.
they were permitted.
And they get told that they need to have a permit in town in order to haul in town. We had that problem at the Legion Hall, with, it was a dumpster divers.
I forget the
I
company.
can't remember the name of the company.
But yeah.
We had that issue on the bottom of Blackstone Street. I can't remember if it was Big Dog or something like that, but yeah, that old house that they rehabbed. I talked to the construction supervisor on the job. He called the company and it all got taken care of. Some people ignore us, but you're not supposed to be dropping a dumpster in town unless you have a permit to haul in the town.
And I mean, I think that's pretty over the.
Right, and we're, I mean,
They
it's
should,
that's a
those
minimum
dumpster
fee.
droppers should be knowing.
Yeah, and that's I mean, that's a pretty minimal fee,
Right.
for on a 12-month basis
Yeah, really.
to be listed as a licensed hauler on our
Right.
list and, you know, if someone calls us about a dumpster, we tell them, go to the list. So if someone who's gonna request a temporary dumpster for whatever purpose, C and D or anything else, that is a separate fee. And my intention is to make it minimal, enough to cover our expenses, enough to, if we have to answer a call about that dumpster. I mean, let's say someone's gonna hire a 20-yard dumpster because they're gonna do an extensive spring cleaning. Well, they would pay a fee from a light, you know, and they would get a dumpster from a licensed hauler. And that should cover us if a neighbor calls us up and complains about that dumpster. Listing it here as a 60-day term with the ability to extend it for 30 days without an additional fee, I think is reasonable. What if someone, you know, inherits a house and they have to clean it out before they can put it on the market? That could take a while. So we don't want to make it impossible for anybody to do things, but we want to make sure that if we have to answer calls for problems, that we know where the dumpster is. We know how long it's been there. We know it's from a licensed hauler. And we know who to contact when there's a complaint from a neighbor. So I thought that was where we were trying to go with this. And obviously it's a non-refundable fee, you know, because we're gonna do the paperwork regardless. So on 4A, if we add a 6 where the X is, we get rid of end payment of additional fee and put per board approval. I'm happy with, you know, it up to that point.
Because on a 6, you have, it says fees for dumpster permits are determined by the board dependent upon the type of permit requested. Annual permits, whether for trash or haulers or C and D annual dumpsters shall be valid for no more than 1 year.
Right. And that's pretty much in line with, you know, what we're doing.
Yeah.
Just for context before you continue, just because I thought it would be illustrative, I did just look up Northbridge's fees. So their trash hauler permit is $200. If you want to just get a permit to provide people with construction and demolition dumpsters, it's only $150. And then for a temporary permit, which is again, that's paid for by a contractor that is providing a dumpster to a property owner. They are the ones getting the permit. That's only $25. So under Northbridge's model, if the number of dumpsters you are providing in Northbridge within a 1-year period is 5 or fewer, it is more economical to just obtain multiple temporary permits. But if you know for a fact that your customer base is robust enough that you will basically be renting out and hauling more frequently than that, you might as well just get the annual permit. And the reason for this is because construction and demolition dumpsters are by their nature always temporary. So the only reason why there's why you would distinguish annual versus temporary is you want to charge the companies that are hauling a lot of dumpsters a certain amount of money, but you still want to give somebody an option if they're a very small business, if they just want to rent out 2, 3, up to 5 dumpsters per year, then you could have them pay a smaller fee since they're not making as much money off of that. So it would be kind of an economic hardship to charge them the same as somebody who's doing 30 dumpsters a year. At least that's my understanding. You could do something equivalent where you would basically charge, since you're charging half of what Northbridge is charging for trash hauler, you could charge half for the other two. $75 for construction and demolition, and then $12.50 per temporary permit.
So in the Northbridge's example, Dan, the annual dumpster for 150.
Yes.
And all of this is based on per location for every location that they have.
No. So for an annual permit, it's my understanding that a hauler that has an annual construction demolition dumpster permit, they can basically rent out as many dumpsters as they want during that year, so long as they're only C&D dumpsters. That's what the $150 is for. It's not by location. It's the permit is to haul that type of dumpster. Temporary permits are by dumpster. Those are the differences.
Now I'm confused. I thought we were talking only about temporary. If we're talking about an allowance for an annual, haven't we defeated the purpose of a temporary?
Construction, as I mentioned, construction and demolition dumpsters are always temporary. There's not really such a thing as a permanent construction and demolition dumpster, because with like even projects that span a year or two, you're not going to keep that dumpster on that property in perpetuity like you would for a dumpster for solid waste. Like a restaurant is always going to be using that dumpster, but construction and demolition dumpsters come and go. So if somebody wanted to do just construction debris hauling, what they would do is that they would get the quote unquote annual permit. They'll still be renting out dumpsters like for brief periods of time. It's hard to explain. And I think I'm doing a bad job of it. But the idea, the idea is for the annual permit is once you have a C&D dumpster permit that's annual, at least that's how Northbridge is doing it, they can rent out as many dumpsters as they want. They basically become just like a trash hauler, but they're limited to C&D dumpsters. You get, but temporary ones are per dumpster for brief periods. So
that brief period could be for construction and demolition, right?
Correct, only for construction and demolition.
I apologize, but I'm confused.
Yeah.
I kind of like Upton's dumpster permit application better. So I was kind of focusing on theirs versus Northbridge. But we're not really at that application fee yet. We're still
Not yet.
working on the regs.
Right.
And most of the companies that I can think of haul more than just C&D.
Right.
And temporary dumpsters can be used for more than just C&D. Like I mentioned, a house clean out, or someone who's doing, actually a landscape contractor may hire a dumpster that's doing a renovation of someone's landscape. And now they're hauling organic material.
Yep.
So that there are, most of the dumpster companies that I can think of don't limit themselves to hauling just one type, because they're not really in the trash business. They're in the trucking business. They just happen to truck things that go in a dumpster, right?
Okay.
And actually, there are a lot of landscapers out there now that have actually bought vehicles that instead of buying a dump truck, they buy what they call a hook truck. And they have dumpster type bodies that they will drop off at a job and leave it there for a short period of time. So that would qualify maybe as a temporary dumpster, depending upon how long it's on the site.
I would think, even if it's on the site for 2 days, it's a temporary dumpster.
So since you brought up Upton, I did just do a quick review of it. That it is possible that Upton's model is less confusing. So let me try to explain it as quickly as I could. So they distinguish between commercial and residential dumpsters. For a commercial dumpster, they charge a certain fee per year and they don't care how long it's there. So, but a residential dumpster is always considered temporary, regardless of its contents. So a residential dumpster is $25 for the first 90 days. Then there's an additional $50 fee if you want to extend it for another 90 days, and then 100, and then a total 100 for the final 90-day period, and that's it. You're capped.
Right.
Right. My intention was to modify that, but I liked their application better.
But see, I think that what their point is they don't want to have those dumpsters just hanging around because it's easy for them to do that. And
Right.
so as it gets, the longer it gets there, the more money it's costing them. And I agree with that. I think that, because we don't want dumpsters hanging around just because they can. I think that doesn't make any sense to me. I think
So,
that,
Said how it works, I'm not really familiar with the pricing model, so if I get a dumpster from somebody, it doesn't behoove the company that the dumpster sit at my place, they're not charging me for the.
Well, there is, usually when you hire a dumpster, depending upon the size, there's a fee for the size.
Yeah,
And you're allowed to keep it for like, say, 2 weeks.
okay, so this is
And
coming,
after 2 weeks, the company wants to charge you more rental.
right, so it's coming from the company. So the company's gonna charge me more money if I keep them.
Correct.
Okay, right, so I was confused, I wasn't understanding it. You were mentioning something about a lack of incentive.
well,
But
I
there really
think
is.
it's the same thing that I think we're talking the same language, we're just not speaking it. If you allow someone with ad lib to just be able to have something for practically nothing, they're going to do that because that's the nature of the beast. But if they are required to have it for a certain time and they need to pay more for the next part of it, because we don't want dumpsters hanging around. We don't want dumpsters.
The dumpster company will increase the fee if it's
Correct.
there for a longer period of
And
time.
they will.
Because they're getting rental for the dumpster,
Right,
all right? Usually when you hire a dumpster, you're allowed to have it for a specified period of time for a specified maximum tonnage. If you go over the tonnage or you go over the rental period,
right.
the dumpster company charges you more. We're kind of preventing the dumpster from being there forever by saying that we're giving you a permit for 60 days with one 30-day extension. So we're gonna prevent that because if someone wants to start over after the 30-day extension, they're
Right.
gonna start over again.
And as Dan said, the cost from in Northbridge, is it Northbridge or Upton?
Upton.
The Upton cost is incrementally more as they, and I think that's what we want to do. I think we wanted to do that because
Because incentivize them to hurry up and get it done.
otherwise we're saying, oh, we don't mind if you have a dumpster all over the place, dumpster this, dumpster that, don't care.
So
We
it's
don't care.
incentivized that we get done within the 90
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
And not spend another so many $100 for another 90,
Correct.
unless you got money to burn.
Okay, so
So it sounds like what you would want then is kind of a fusion of the two models, where if somebody's getting a dumpster permit for anything, C and D or otherwise, then if they want it to be temporary, hold on, no, maybe I'm misunderstanding. For individual dumpsters, you want to have a separate kind of permit that's temporary.
Well, a household, somebody that's doing C and D,
Uh-huh.
we're talking about that. Somebody that's doing C and D and they have it for a certain length of time. But if there's no time limit given to them,
Satisfying. All
All right. I
Right.
think I understand. Again, the major problem with comparing these two is Upton and Northbridge charge differently. Northbridge charges the contractor, Upton charges the resident.
right, and I think that that's probably good. Charge the resident,
I mean, this is pretty much
Right.
shutting it down in 90 days.
right?
You know, I mean, if you gotta, you know, do another project or whatever, you come see us and you're gonna start over again.
Yeah,
Right,
So that would kind of put the kibosh on it hanging around forever.
right,
So if we were to go with a format like that, when we get to that application stage, we could probably put that issue to bed at that
Right.
point.
right, I would say. yeah.
All right, so getting back to these regulations. Are we all good with 4A and B? So that we can move on to 5.
And are we gonna say per board approval?
Yes,
Okay.
so we're
yeah,
gonna get
yeah,
rid
yeah,
of,
Okay,
we're gonna get rid of and payment for an additional fee.
Right.
Because we're gonna let them have that 30-day extension beyond the 60, just by, you know, asking and getting board, you know, per board approval.
Right.
Board approval, and that'll give us the option that if it's been a troublesome dumpster, to have a discussion before we grant the 30 more days.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Just a question, are we advancing or is there gonna be an opportunity for us to respond back to any of the previous numbers?
Yeah, we can go back.
I just didn't know how you were.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get all the way through it.
Gotcha, one time you come back.
Yeah, and Jack's trying to make some of these changes on, you know, on the fly as we go.
Okay.
Like I said, at the end of the night, I really want to have something in hand, right? We can call it, you know, a draft that we can, you know, have Dan put his eyes on it one more time.
Yeah,
And we can get it to the attorney and we can, you know, get it off our agenda.
Okay.
You know, we can revisit it on an annual basis.
I just didn't know I hadn't had an opportunity to respond to any of the points before.
Okay.
Before. So I just didn't know if you were given an opportunity for us to go back.
Absolutely.
We're moving on because you made it sound like we're.
Yeah, well, I was hoping to move on to 5,
Okay,
but if you would like to go back, by all means.
no, we can move on as it will be one time come back around and retouch.
Absolutely.
It was just unclear as to what you were doing for you.
I'm just trying to move this along.
Okay. Well, we don't want to rush things, you know?
No, we want to get it right.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, these things have been on our table for a long time. So
And we still want to get it right.
we do, but I'm trying to make it,
Yep.
you know, I'm trying to make it happen. All
We're
right,
all trying to.
that's right. Any issues with 5? That looks like a pretty
Yeah.
boilerplate. It's listing Mendon.
town amendment, Board of Health, because as we said,
Yeah.
there's sensitivities.
Right,
Yep, we can do that. Town of Mendon Board of Health. On 6, I had a question. Fees for dumpster permits are determined by the Board of Health, dependent on the type of permit requested. we're only charging or proposing to charge a fee on temporary dumpsters. Right? Because if we start charging fees to everybody that already has a dumpster in town, we could,
Well, I think there's already been a distinction made amongst category of temporary, two different types. C and D and then other, or non-C and D. C and D has been brought up as a separate category of temporary dumpster.
right?
So I think that's how I'm taking that. So not looking at permanent, I think it's already been talked about in the language that that was one of the questions I had previously. It seems like we're already talking about two different categories of temporary dumpsters. C and D being one category and then non-C and D being the other category. Am I correct on that, Dan?
I believe so.
They all come under temporary dumpster.
Correct, but I think that question, that number 6 you're reading,
Yeah, fees.
goes to the point that there are two distinguishable types of temporary dumpsters here. C and D being one and then non-C and D being the other.
Okay, so,
That's how.
okay, so when my question has been answered, it's not just for temporary. Well, it actually is.
No, it is for temporary, but my understanding is there's two categories of temporary we're talking about.
Okay,
C and D being one category of temporary, and I guess for lack of a better term, non-C and D being another category of temporary. But both
Okay.
categories are temporary.
so by the board dependent upon type of dumpster requested.
To clarify, the distinction for temporary dumpster only exists for C and D. There are no other forms of temporary dumpster permits available. If they're getting a dumpster for the purposes of removing solid waste of any other kind, solid waste is distinguished from C and D, they would need a full trash hauler license before they can issue those dumpsters to individuals.
Okay, so the homeowner calls up, they inherited a house, they need to clean out the interior of the house. That's not C and D.
Yep. Then they would, again, the homeowner of the house is immaterial to these regulations, at least these parts, because they're not the ones that are being charged for the permit. The contractor is. So the contractor is deciding what type and how many dumpsters they want to be providing. They're either a trash hauler, which means they can provide any number of dumpsters of any kind. They can either be just C and D, in which case they can provide any number of C and D for any length of time, or they can get temporary dumpsters for singular dumpsters for brief periods of time. Those are the three categories. Each category is more narrow than the last. Trash hauler can provide any kind of service. C and D can provide C and D services for any duration, and then temporary is one dumpster for a specified period per permit. And again, the charge is always to the haulers themselves, not the owner of the property. And the intent of that is to be consistent with what you are already doing, which is licensing the haulers. Because if you wanted to do something more like Upton's model where you are charging the resident, I should specify that, at least based on me trying to go through their website very quickly, it does not look like they license haulers. Or at least if they do, I don't see where. But the health department doesn't have any regulations regarding haulers. They charge residents specifically. And then it's up to the resident to decide who they're getting the trash service from.
So we require our people to get authorized.
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
so so they're the haulers
Yes.
and they can either come to us and say, who should we get? Here's the list, blah, blah, blah. They're all registered with us. So. And they pay an annual permit.
The trash haulers do, not the resident.
No, no, right. We pay for our trash independently.
Yeah.
You know. It's another story. Not about dumpsters. This is dumpsters.
But right now, when the building department, from viewpoint, if they have a construction, a residential remodeling, stuff like that, the Board of Health gets notified, and what I look for are dumpsters and porta potties. And I look to see if those names are on the list, license amended.
Right.
So right now, somebody can get a C&D dumpster through viewpoint from the building department, viewpoint. And it says E.L. Harvey dumpster, yes, I approve it.
Right.
If it's a porta potty, that's Choices John's, that's not on the approval list, I deny it. So right now, there's nothing stopping them from getting an already C&D dumpster that's already on the approved list with no cost. And we don't say how long they can have the dumpster for.
So if that's the model you folks wish to proceed with, because like that's ultimately the difference between Northbridge's and Upton's regulations. It's what are you prioritizing? Northbridge, despite the somewhat deceptive name, cares about the integrity of the haulers themselves. They are holding the haulers to account, and they've created a series of subcategories for what kind of haulers they have, simply based on, I guess, the demographics of the businesses that they experience. That's why they focus entirely on charging the haulers. They don't care which residents are getting what dumpsters, provided that the haulers they're using are approved and inspected. Upton and Reading don't care about the haulers. They only care about the dumpsters on the local level, on the property owner level. The property owner becomes responsible for making sure that the hauler they have is reputable. The property owner is the person we hold to account, they would hold to account, and the property owner gets the permit. Those are the two different kinds of philosophies for regulating dumpsters and trash. Mendon, at present, is using Northbridge's philosophy, which is regulating the haulers and making it the responsibility of the haulers to obtain the permit and to inform the town where the dumpsters are, what kinds of dumpsters they're providing, et cetera, et cetera. And then provided, provided that a resident is getting it from an approved source, then it doesn't matter what the resident is doing.
But is there a time limit on, say, C&D dumpsters?
At present, no. The purpose of this regulation is, if as it's written now, is extrapolating from Mendon's existing model, using Northbridge as the kind of skeleton. This will provide this will basically provide the possibility that if you have a company, or specifically if you have a hauler that only wants to rent certain kinds of dumpsters for very brief periods on a very limited basis, this allows them to obtain a permit for less money. That's it. That's the reason why the categories exist. It's basically allowing certain businesses to say, we're only doing this and nothing else, so we shouldn't have to pay as much as everybody else. Like E.L. Harvey picks up every kind of trash, but maybe a very small business that only deals in construction and demolition debris, and therefore they only have a contract with a specific disposal company. They're not going to do that. They don't want to pay for the full $100, let's say, because they're not dealing with other forms of waste. They don't have as much money. Their business is smaller. That's Northbridge's reasoning. That's their model.
But that doesn't give us any control in how long these things are hanging about.
To some degree, no. Unless, it's my understanding that the primary distinction is individual dumpsters under, like, on small scale, you do have control. But once a construction and demolition or trash hauler declares that they want to basically be able to provide an unlimited number, no, it doesn't really give you any control about how long they're staying. So once somebody has, at least as far as my understanding goes, and as far as the regulations have been written, once a hauler has applied for and been approved for an annual dumpster permit for C&D, they can issue as many C&D construction and demolition dumpsters for as long as they want anywhere.
And we can't require them to let us, to inform us where they are?
No, you can, and you do now. Because if you're going to be making a construction and demolition permit, which you would have to if you accepted these regulations, then it would operate just like your regular trash hauler. They would still have to provide you with a list of locations that they are going to be servicing. And you could put language in there that basically tells them that whenever somebody gets like a permit in a residential district, the hauler's responsibility to inform you of that and what the time frame is. But yes, this regulation does require them to tell you where they're going to be servicing. And for who.
Because B covers that, right?
Yep.
It's a property owner on which dumpster will be kept, location of dumpster on said property, name, address, phone number of the owner of the dumpster.
Yep. So anybody that has a C&D permit will have to provide you with that information. And to be fair, the same is technically true of a trash hauler that's providing C&D, although if you would like me to clarify that, I definitely can in the text.
So that would definitely mean that this fee is going to be paid by the trash hauler.
Right.
Under every circumstance, yes.
So if somebody wants to see a D dumpster from E.L. Harvey, E.L. Harvey has to send us a check. The C&D dumpster? Yeah, I don't see that coming in anytime soon.
So here's the thing, like I said, every category becomes more and more narrow. If E.L. Harvey is a licensed trash hauler, then by definition, they are also licensed to provide C&D dumpsters. Every category is more broad. If you just want to provide C&D, you get a C&D dumpster. And if you just want to provide a limited number of C&D dumpsters for very brief periods of time, then you would pay per dumpster. So if you have E.L. Harvey and they are already a fully licensed trash hauler, they can provide C&D just like they can provide anything else.
And they don't have to pay a separate fee for that dumpster
No,
because they have an annual permit.
that's correct.
Okay. So the only people that would be
The only,
paying a separate,
the
the
only,
go ahead.
sorry, the only individuals that would have to pay by dumpster are those individuals that provide, are those contractors that provide so few services that it would be more economical for them to just say, I'm doing 3 dumpsters, here's 3 separate permits. That is the sole purpose of the temporary permit, is to account for incredibly small businesses with limited customer bases.
And that has a certain timeline to them.
Yes,
Yeah,
because in this case, you are regulating specific dumpsters.
correct.
But the moment that that person decides to move to the annual level, there's technically no time limit, because once they move to the annual level, it would be a little difficult to kind of get into the nitty gritty. You're not charging them for the nitty gritty anymore anyway. You're no longer regulating the interaction between that dumpster and the owner. You're now just regulating the haulers as a whole.
Even if it's a C and D.
Well, the annual C&D dumpster, yes. Even if it's a C&D. If they have the annual C&D dumpster permit, that means they can rent out as many C&D dumpsters as they want for that year.
Without notifying us?
I mean, they would have to notify you. According to 4B, they have to provide the name and address of any property owners on which dumpster will be kept, the locations, the name and address and phone number of the owner. So whenever they would, if they, that's not spelled out clearly, but if you wanted to, I can make that change. Every time they get a new person during the annual period, they would have to update you first.
Our current trash hauls list, 9 out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, provide C&D dumpsters.
They haul everything.
They haul everything.
Yep, and that would continue to be the case, because, again, somebody who is permitted as a trash hauler can continue hauling any kind of trash.
And when I was looking for household dumpsters, we're having that issue on Human Road. I went through all the amended licensed trash haulers. There was like one that provided such a dumpster. The rest of them did not. A household trash dumpster.
I think I'm getting a little more confused as I go along.
Yeah, because, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Dan, but I still would like to think that the board has control about how long a C&D dumpster can be hanging about.
If you
And
want to, now you could just add a stipulation that to basically clarify that any kind of C&D dumpster can only be maintained on a property for a set amount of time.
But we have that in 4A, where it says a non-refundable permit fee as outlined in section E6, depending on the type of permit application, temporary requested. The temporary C&D permits may be renewed for the additional 30 days upon application for the board approval.
Right, but that's
So does,
yeah.
oh, sorry.
That's because only the temporary C&D permit cares about timeline, because that is because that's the only permit type that regulates a specific dumpster as opposed to the hauler itself.
Right.
If you wanted, I can add to the section under operations that basically indicates that wait, hold on. Just really quick, under definitions for C&D dumpster. Oh, never mind. It doesn't specify. Let's see. Waste. Where did we originally indicate 60 days? Oh, temporary.
Right up in temporary C&D up above on 4.
So if that's the case, I could put in a section under section F, operations, that basically indicate that any dumpster that's being used solely for C&D can only be maintained on a property for a set period.
Correct.
The problem with that is I would caution you, there are construction projects that can take months.
Right, well, we're giving them 3 months.
No, there are construction projects that can take over a year.
Right, I get that, and just saying that,
Dan, are you talking about residential?
No, there's no, this regulation does not distinguish between residential and commercial, simply because again, it's regulating the hauler. It doesn't care who they're hauling it for. So because of the way this regulation is framed, it makes no distinction between where the dumpster is placed, at least for the purposes of deciding what type of permit you have. So a commercial C&D dumpster could remain long-term. And in that case, the hauler you would use would be either a trash hauler or somebody who has an annual C&D permit.
I'm a little stumped. Because the dumpsters that we're trying to
right,
regulate.
Yep.
Are dumpsters that in most cases, are placed on a residential piece of property that become offensive or hazardous to the health and well-being of
neighbor.
the neighbors. So are we going down the wrong road, Dan?
No, because the reason why I specify that is if Section E existed in isolation, you would not have that power. But Section F does provide you with specific regulations about how a dumpster is to be handled. Well, Section F and Section H. So Section F gives you provides you with authority to dictate how a hauler behaves when they are moving the dumpster, which would mean if you got a complaint that a hauler is leaving behind debris when they're picking up a dumpster, then you can say they are in violation. And Section H gives you the right to dictate the types of dumpster that they're using. Its cleanliness, its its durability, its size and placement, and its condition.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is it's not the individual sections of the regulation. It's the sections of the regulations combined that give you the oversight.
Correct. So the only reason why permitting is making a distinction is because it's distinguishing the types of businesses you want to be able to, like, all this section does is distinguish the types of businesses you're engaging with and how much you're charging each type of business. The subsequent sections give you the authority to dictate how those businesses operate. Section F gives you the authority to dictate the manner in which they haul. Section H gives you the authority to dictate the actual physical structure that they are hauling. And if you so choose, you can add in one of those two sections that certain types of dumpsters can only be maintained for certain periods. So for example, you could add under, say, either operations or dumpsters, it depends, that a dumpster maintained on a residential property cannot exceed a period of 90 days, 120 days, what have you.
Okay, so that would prevent the dumpster from hanging around on a residential property.
Correct.
On a commercial property, or a municipal property, that would also allow for the dumpster to be there for a longer period of time for the type of projects you're talking about that could take a year.
Yes. So you
Okay.
can choose to specify that level of control only applies to residential. So if you put it in under dumpsters, you can basically say dumpsters placed on a residential property may not occupy that space for a period exceeding such and such without Board of Health approval.
I think that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Right,
That's
exactly.
so
But
that,
I'm not sure why section 4 of E isn't covering that, Dan.
Because that section only talks about the permits themselves. This is an administrative section that's basically distinguishing what kind of paperwork you want them to provide for the permit. It's not going to mention the conditions of the dumpster because and it doesn't mention the authority for how to regulate the specific dumpsters because there are separate sections that exist within the regulation to do that. So each subsection of the regulation talks about basically a different subject. The section on permitting just discusses the actual process of approving the permit.
Right.
It doesn't mention like timeframes or your abilities to regulate specific dumpsters because there's already a section that does that down below.
Well, what about temporary C&D permits may be renewed for an additional 30 days upon application?
Right.
Perfect.
So that's for the permit. You can and again, the permit is basically an administrative tool for the hauler. The hauler can choose to get an extension for a specific dumpster, which is the only reason why they have a temporary C&D. And under those conditions, they can request that permit be extended because the dumpster that they are renting out is going to be there for longer.
Right.
But even and that only exists because there is a separate type of permit for businesses that want to only rent out 1 or 2 dumpsters temporarily. That's the only reason that specification is there. But that does not prevent you in any way, shape, or form from specifying in a different section that there is a hard time limit for certain types of dumpsters in certain zones. So you can still regulate that dumpsters in residential zones cannot exceed a certain time frame without even touching the permit
Right.
section.
Okay, all right.
And I think that's my confusion is I'm trying to take it section by section when you really have to take it as a whole.
Right.
Yep.
So you have to get down into just, so we've gone through all of E.
Yep.
So would we put that into operations? Would that category saying, residential permitting will only be for 90 days? Is
So
that,
I propose if you want that, what I'm going to write right now is under section F, operations,
right?
I'm going to add a subsection 12, and it's going to read for dumpsters. A dumpster within a residential zone.
C&D dumpster.
Well,
I mean, you don't actually have to specify that.
yeah, let's cover any dumpster in a residential area.
Okay,
Cannot exceed, cannot remain for a period greater than 90 days without prior approval from the board.
So any residential dumpster,
So, sorry, let me amend that slightly. So the text would be a dumpster within a residential zone cannot remain on site for a period greater than 90 days without prior approval from the board.
good, yeah,
So that not only sets the ideal limit, but it does also give you the authority to override that if an extenuating circumstance occurs. And the
Correct.
immediate circumstance that jumps to mind is the full construction of a new property. So if somebody has just demolished a property down to just the land and they want to build a house from scratch, that could potentially take longer than, well, that's
Right.
unusual, but it could potentially
Right.
take longer than that.
Yeah.
right, good, yep,
You know, someone who's recovering from a fire.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep,
So,
Yeah.
but in that circumstance, provided that they tell you that that's what they intend to do, then you can waive that limitation. You can just say, all right, you can keep it for longer.
right. Yep, that makes great sense, Dan.
And honestly, I would actually put that in section H, as section H13, rather than putting it under operations, just because it talks about a dumpster rather
Yep.
than
Correct.
rather than
Yep,
the
see
manner.
that right there, yep. Yep. So that would go under 13.
Yep.
H13,
H13.
yeah, that makes sense. Much better sense than where we were before.
Anything else?
On F, I think you have to say must instead of may. F6.
F6. Okay. All right, so we're all done with section E.
Yeah, permitting. Good.
Okay. All right.
Section E10, under section E10, that placeholder should be replaced with, what's the section on enforcement? Section J.
Now on to section F, operations, we changed may to must. We changed may to must on the last line of 6. The permittee may notify the board of any customer who continues with the repeated offenses. We'll change that to must also.
Yes, yeah.
Anything for section F?
They had. It's the same. as what I'm looking at.
All right, so we're gonna move to section G. Anybody have anything on recyclable materials?
I just wondered what clear, brown, or green food and beverage containers only meant.
I was assuming those were glass.
They are glass.
Okay. So you know how there's different colors of glass, right?
Yes, I do.
So that's, I guess that's what I was thinking of, you know, you get some things in the different colors of glass.
Right, I just wondered why it was just. Didn't say colored instead of.
I believe it's because certain types of I believe it's because different colors of glass use different kinds of dye, some of which may or may not be recyclable, although I am not 100% certain about that.
That's interesting.
I can research it, but subsection 1 of those regulations means that you can adjust these at any time.
I do remember bringing glass to Foster Farms back in the day, and you had to separate the white and the green. So maybe that is it. Maybe it's the dyes.
I mean, I think it's because they don't want to mix clear with, because if they're gonna melt down the clear, they want it all to be clear. I get that. I mean, that wasn't the problem. I just wondered why it was said brown, because all beer bottles are brown,
Yeah.
and then green. Some of them are, well, a lot, some are green.
Yeah.
And then I'm just wondering why they didn't, like red glass, like I have vases that are, may be ready to go out somewhere, and it's red. I just wondered why that couldn't
Yeah,
be.
glass in general is a problem.
Right.
So I believe it's based on the chemical impurities, because I know certain colors of glass can only be obtained by infusing it with certain metals. Those metals might not be appropriate to mix or recycle.
Right,
And this is specifying food and beverage containers.
right,
So that would eliminate the glass you're talking about, or some of them have a broken stained glass window.
right,
So it does eliminate things that aren't beverage containers.
right.
It also prevents people from recycling uranium glass,
Oh, yeah, we hate that.
which you don't want to do.
Right,
What else are you reading, glass?
it is a,
An atomic bomb glass thing?
no, it's a particular kind of glass that they use in like laboratories and stuff.
Oh, really? Like beakers and.
I don't
Test
know
tubes.
what it is.
It is a type of decorative glass that was more popular in the mid 20th century. It is unless chipped or damaged, the uranium inside it is technically stable. And it's safe, quote unquote, to use so long as it's not damaged.
Interesting.
It makes a very distinctive color, and therefore it's very popular, and because it can potentially glow in the dark. It should not be used for food and beverage because of the higher risk of contaminating something.
Wow.
That has not,
Right.
but that hasn't stopped people. You can get a uranium glass butter dish for absurd amounts of money if you want.
Wow.
I think the rest of it's fine.
Good. All right, let's go to section H.
Eliminate this entire section, please. Okay.
That was short.
It's only about dumpsters.
What's plastics number 1 through 7? I missing on
What is it?
D4.
E,
Oh, yeah, there's different classifications of plastics. Yeah, underneath the plastic container, there's like a recyclable triangle
it has
with a
a
number.
number in it.
Oh, I never noticed that.
Yeah.
That was full.
Yeah, and you can only recycle 1 through 7, and there may be like a 9 or, yeah. So you have to turn it over and look and see, because I'm always after my ladies in quilting to say, is that a 7? And they say, what is that?
You learn something new tonight.
I believe the higher numbers are intended for long-term use, so they're not appropriate for recycling because they're not, like, they're significantly more durable and harder to process.
Right.
Okay, I had no issues with the word traffic. I thought that should be understood.
Where are we?
Dumpsters, section H, number 2.
Right,
The dumpster should be situated so as not to cause a visual obstruction of traffic. I didn't think we had to go and define traffic.
right, well,
Because traffic could be
if
any
you're
kind of
coming
traffic.
out of this, if you're coming out of somebody's driveway and their dumpsters right at the end of the driveway, I
Right.
guess, but that, who would do that?
Right, but you know, it could be pedestrian traffic, it could be
Right.
vehicle traffic, it's all, people need to be able to see.
Is this because the word traffic is highlighted?
Yeah, because you had that comment.
The comment, I just appended it there because, not because the word traffic meant anything, but because,
Oh,
if we, basically, I proposed that there is the possibility that you could dictate setback requirements from abutting properties, like specific setback requirements, 10 feet, 15 feet. And I anticipated that if you were going to add that, it would be most appropriate to put it under subsection 2.
Right.
okay, so it was just brought to my attention that that might be a good idea. It was mentioned from someone in another department that if we had minimum setbacks from property lines, that would prevent someone from placing a dumpster on the property line. Which could be close to an abutter, especially like downtown in the village, or over on the lake where properties are real tight.
That would be very annoying.
Dan, any idea what a reasonable setback from any property line would be?
So unlike with Title 5, there's not really a specific setback for the purposes of like convenience or to mitigate dispute. So as a result, I put in the comment as an option, but technically speaking, H2 already allows you basically it gives you the authority that you can order someone to move their dumpster further away from the property line if it becomes an issue. So it specifies that each dumpster must be located on the property so as not to interfere with the safety, convenience, or health of abutters or residents. So if you were to receive a complaint basically saying my neighbor is putting their trash bin so close to the property line that like the smell is irritating me, then under these regulations as they are currently written, you could order that person to move their dumpster away from that property line in order to mitigate an existing concern.
Okay, so even though it's not specified in feet,
Yeah,
it is covered.
So,
Right.
and the reason
Okay.
why I didn't want to do that is because I don't actually know what a reasonable version is. And unlike things like septic systems, the size of a lot will affect like how far away it's feasible to put away from a property line. Like
You're
it's
right.
not
Some
appropriate.
lots are so tight,
Yeah.
10 feet could make a difference.
But
And
we
that
could-
also,
we could see that, we could visualize that if it became an issue. We could say, you know what, you've got to move that over 4 feet or
Right,
blah, blah.
right, because we did specify that in the beginning
Right,
of 2.
right.
Okay, sounds good to me.
so a clarification under 6. After 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., I would add, wait, hold on, while within a residential zone.
Right.
Because this was brought to my attention by someone in another town. According to Mass General Law, you cannot apply a limitation time, like basically like time frames for removal of dumpsters in commercial or residential zones. In commercial or industrial zones. You can only apply those limitations for residential.
Right.
Okay, so you're saying right after 10 PM and 7 AM while in a residential area?
Yes.
Right.
Okay,
And if you would like to put add a bit of additional clarity, where it says these in the event that these regulations are in conflict with any other local law, bylaw, or regulation, next to local, you could put state and federal as well, just to cover all of your bases.
Local and state, or do you have more?
Local, state, and you could do federal if you wanted, although I can't think of any federal dumpster regulations.
You never know.
Yeah, that would future-proof you in the unlikely event that ever comes up.
and we're gonna add a 13
Yes.
to that section. Anybody have anything else to add on section H?
One thing I would ask, Jack, you might have answered me on this. Do we find out if there's anything existing regarding any existing dumpster guidelines in our bylaws?
We do not have any.
And the last, even if we did, the last sentence would mean that no conflict can exist, because any conflict is automatically resolved by whichever of the regulations is more applicable at the time. So if zoning is more strict, then we would defer to zoning.
Next section. Indemnification.
See anything else?
No, it's fine.
Rest of
Jack.
the-
Right? Violations, section J.
That makes sense. Variance to-
Okay, so along with a fee structure, we're gonna have to come up with a finding structure.
Yeah,
And in this section, if you wanted to have that power, you could also indicate who you want to have the power to fine. Because much like in housing code, you could fine the property owner in instances where the violation is clearly their doing. So if the property owner consistently refuses to leave the dumpster closed, if the property owner is responsible for damaging the dumpster or leaving the area excessively dirty, you could fine the owner, because that's the owner's fault, not the fault of the hauler, because the hauler's not involved in that.
But it is his dumpster.
It's the haul,
Right.
yeah, it's the hauler's dumpster, but like in this case, the transaction is very similar to a renter. So, you know, there are certain things under CMR that even though the owner of the property is the person that is the person that's responsible for a majority of things, the occupant or renter could still be fined in a housing case, because it's not really the owner's fault if the renter decides to punch the wall so hard that it breaks. That's a violation, but the renter has created the violation. So
Yeah,
it would be appropriate to fine the renter.
You could have a dumpster that is merely being overfilled. That wouldn't be the dumpster company's doing. It would be the homeowner or the contractor, the people that are using the dumpster, that are filling it above the fill line, and it's spilling out.
You would think that the guy that owns it though would be checking on it, making sure when it needs to be dumped.
They don't come unless you call
And I should also specify that in circumstances like that, because you've indicated, because you've indicated in a previous section that they have to tell you if they're refusing to take something, you could say that that's the fault of the contractor, because you could just say that the contractor isn't picking it up often enough. Their contract is not sufficient. They're not doing their due diligence. But you don't honestly have to decide that. You can make that in the regulations. You can basically you can decide that based on who you think it's most reasonable to penalize based on the evidence presented within the case. So, oftentimes I've done inspections where I go on site and the responsible party voluntarily provides the information. I've had renters tell me to my face, yes, I removed the smoke detector because it was bothering me.
Okay.
Yeah, so, but under certain circumstances, you can, for example, under most circumstances, unless you have proof otherwise, it should be the responsibility of the hauler to keep the area around the dumpster free and clean, because they're the ones that have the highest likelihood of messing that up if they're not adequately removing the trash every time they pick it up. But if you have clear evidence to suggest that the owner of the property is causing that damage through negligence or abuse of the dumpster, then you can still fine them. You would just need to present evidence to suggest that, or have it at least.
So on violations number 1, what would you suggest we insert?
You could, under number 1, you could add a separate subsection that basically say that the responsibility of paying these fees are dependent on a case-by-case basis as decided by the board.
Right, that's good,
Okay,
like that.
and then we do the fee structure in a separate area.
You would basically just insert sorry, I'm a little confused. Are you talking about the fee structure for the permits or the fine for a violation?
I'm trying to fill in the blank where it says insert fining structure here.
So what that would be is basically you would decide, do you want to only have one kind of fine? Do you just want to say every time there's a violation, it's going to be $25 regardless of how often it's happened? Or
case by case.
Yeah. Or do you want, well, if you're, you can't really do a case by case for a fine. If you're going to do case by case, you're going to have to say what the minimum and maximum values are at the very least. So you could say that a fine will be no more than $50 and no less than $5 or something like that. You would still have to provide a range to prevent this section from being abused. But the reason why I said fining structure is because some places would like to say first offense is this much, second offense is this much, third offense is this much. So so that.
I think that's good too.
All right, so that's what we have to do to fill in that blank.
Correct.
All right, so.
And you can decide and renegotiate that as time goes on, to account for changing economic values, any other
Yes,
reasons.
storms or,
All right, so
plagues.
if we do first offense, 50,
I was thinking like 10,
I
25.
was thinking of 25.
all right, so if we do
25.
25, 50, and 75.
Yeah,
I'm kind of, well, part of that, the third strike, you're out.
100,
Third strike, the permit gets revoked and the dumpster gets removed.
okay.
Okay,
Once you get the fourth offense, we'll give you 3 strikes, but the fourth time, you're
We're
done.
done.
So you
So-
can
First
still do
offense,
that.
5, second offense, 50, third offense, 75, fourth permit revoked.
What were we saying, Dan?
I was gonna say, if you don't want to clarify the point at which you can revoke the permit, J2 already tells you that you can basically like you can basically revoke or suspend their permit whenever you feel like they've
Yeah.
caused a big enough problem.
All right, so we'll just do 1, 2, 3,
1, 2, 3.
Right, yeah,
25, 50, 75. Tom,
This per day, right?
per offense, and a new day, each day shall constitute a new violation.
So you
yeah,
say
that'll make
so
it work quicker.
if you're gonna tier it 1, 2, 3, how does that coincide with the
So
per
the-
day? reference?
So it's day 125, day 2 is 50, so that's 75 total, day 3 is 150 total.
Typically, if you're gonna do it
Yeah.
per day, you have a set amount that you do each day.
I'm just gonna leave it.
Yeah.
And then
So-
you can even say, if after so many days,
I have to
Rate
take a
goes
look.
up.
Do my-
So the way it would work is the first time, like in this case, it depends on what time frame you want to assign. If the time frame is 24 hours, so 1 day, the first time you notice the violation, it's $25. And then you come back the next day, and the violation's still there. So then you've already charged them 25. Now you charge them an additional 50 because it's a violation and it's recurring. Then on the third day, if it's still there, you charge them an additional 75, 150 total. And then every subsequent day, it's just going to continue accruing 75s. It's not going to go higher. That's typically how these sorts of per offense structures work. In food and housing, the timelines tend to be longer. So it makes a little bit more sense. But I should point out that in this case, a lot of these violations cause imminent health problems, overflowing trash, obstruction of traffic, like causes of pests. So like the subsection of the housing code that deals with trash explicitly says that trash has to be resolved within 1 to 5 days. So having a 1 day timeline for a violation correction is actually perfectly reasonable when dealing with trash.
I'm good with that. I know in Milford, there's a building violation and it's nothing that's gonna really cause harm to anybody. And, all it is, it's a little unsightly. And I think it's $100 a day.
Wow.
That's what I was told in this particular, what they're calling a building violation. And it's $100 every day. So I don't think what we're proposing here is unreasonable, and I think it's enough that it should get the trash haulers' attention. And then again, we are covered because we have the ability at any time to say it's revoked or suspended.
See you later, bye-bye.
So I'm good with the violation section.
The only other thing that I would say is unless you have a town bylaw that already tells you how your appeal process works, you might want to specify it within these regulations. But I'm not familiar enough with Mendon's bylaws to know if they've already outlined how appeals work.
I can ask Ellen.
All right, variance section.
Prepared in case we do, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it.
My only question would be, do you have to actually hold a public hearing for a variance to what's already been set up in regulation? Could you just do that in a regular meeting,
I would hope so.
you know?
Dan, any comment on the public hearing section of variance number 2?
Yeah, so in the case of a variance to these regulations basically means a request outside of what's already, allowed within it. So like, for example, giving somebody the approval to keep a C&D dumpster on a residential property for longer than 90 days, that's not a variance because there's already a subsection that says the Board of Health can make a decision to extend that at will. So a variance would be somebody asking to be exempt from, say, not having to put their dumpster so that it obstructs traffic, or getting like a gigantic dumpster that takes up their entire yard, or not picking up after themselves. They're asking for an exempt. Yeah. They're
Okay, so
asking
that
for
would
a
be-
huge exemption.
Okay, yeah, so I guess I would imagine that as being, a pretty rare situation, but probably common in the city where someone has to put a dumpster that takes up 3 parking spots in front of a building.
Yup. Like-
And that obviously is going to affect traffic. It's going to affect the residents' ability to park in front of that particular address. So that's something that we have to be prepared for, but it should be a pretty rare occurrence.
As an example, pool code has a section for variances. Variances are almost never granted. Ever. It exists such that under extenuating circumstances, the regulatory authority can make the decision to waive certain requirements. So if there's a fire, for example, and it's like a major municipal building, you could waive those requirements because you need the dumpster there in order to quickly remedy like something that's going to damage the public good. But hopefully that's going to be rare in the extreme. So under most conditions, if somebody is asking to be exempt from minimum health and safety standards, you can just say no. Unless they would have to do a lot of legwork to prove it, which is why you would need to hold a public hearing. Because like somebody that's asking to be exempt from reasonable regulations about how they should treat a dumpster or where they should place it, that person should do the legwork to prove it.
Yeah,
Okay. So. Tom, do you want to go back through any sections? Making some notes.
well, under the permitting, I wondered if, under number 1, where we use the word all persons collecting,
Yeah,
change the word collecting to all, change it phrasing to all persons contracted to pick up and dispose of.
I could see that.
Because since we're really focusing this permitting toward the entities providing these dumpsters and not the residential people themselves.
Okay, so all
Technically, as a resident-
persons
So the phrasing might be something like, all persons contracted to pick up and dispose of solid waste, receptacles, etc.
Just as a quick, I don't mean to interrupt, I apologize. I have to run. I'm a little over my time anyway. Is there anything you folks need from me before I go?
No, we'll get this typed up and we'll send it to you.
Yep.
So that you can review it in print
Yep.
or on the computer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
Thank you very much.
Perfect.
Dan.
Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, all persons contracted to,
Yeah, so
Pick
instead
up
of
and
saying
dispose
all
of.
persons collecting, all persons contracted to pick up and dispose of would replace the word collecting.
okay,
Or I should say it would be anything,
I'm not quite sure I like the word pickup. Can we use contracted to collect?
or
and
collecting,
dispose?
we're trying to get rid of, because collecting technically as a resident, I'm collecting stuff. I'm the collector. So that's why I wanted to get rid of the word collecting and go to the action of what the company's doing. They're picking it up and disposing of it.
Okay, how about transport?
Well, to incorporate transport as part of that. All persons contracted to pick up, transport, and dispose of.
Well, you're right, because what do we call the guy that comes and does your trash pickup? You're right, okay.
I mean,
Yeah, for some reason I'm thinking pickup just didn't,
I mean, technically, you could say, technically you could say the resident is the collector. They're the ones that are collecting all this stuff.
yeah,
I'm just saying, if we're gonna point everything to the, I just thought that getting, just to put in those three actions, pick up, I like the transport part, include that and dispose of.
okay, so to pick up,
That would cover all the actions of that company.
yeah,
involved
pick
in
up,
servicing,
transport,
pick up, transport, and dispose of. So it would read,
and
all persons
dispose of.
contracted to pick up, transport, and dispose of solid waste, recycled materials under construction and demolition debris. The town of Mendon shall obtain a trash hauler permit from the board prior to commencing with collection.
Okay.
And
For some reason, the word pickup alone, I have to put it in context.
yeah,
I mean, pick up trash, yeah. Versus collect, right? Because we're kind of collecting it and putting it at the curb so they can pick it up.
yeah, we're actually, you can actually say we're the collectors as the resident, we're collecting it. For somebody to come and pick it up, transport it, and dispose of it.
Gotcha.
And it is my non-pickup list.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, see, but I had to think about that. All right, so hopefully we've got something here.
What happens at this point?
Well, we need it edited,
And we have it on the agenda tomorrow, right?
right? So the only thing we didn't really get
So is
to,
that the only, I'm sorry, is that the only thing you have to talk about? Was that it? You want to go through, or was that it?
well,
On permit?
Oh, on my, and to go back to?
Yeah, did you want to go through the whole thing, or was that just that one thing you wanted to go back to?
No, I think the only thing would, on number 2, it says any contractor that operates or supplies a dumpster or trash collection service.
Yeah.
Make that any contractor that operates and or supplies a dumpster and or provides trash collection service.
And slash or supplies.
where are we?
Number 2,
Under
under permit.
permitting, number 2,
Okay,
the initial introduction where it says any contractor that operates or supplies a dumpster or trash collection service. To have it phrased, any contractor that operates and or supplies a dumpster and or provides trash collection service. Whereas the initial statement seems to be an or only, whereas the and or covers companies that might be doing both.
That would be a trash pickup service and a trash collection service.
Well, that's how they want to define themselves, right? I don't know, if it's that too much.
Alright, so we got that. Any others?
That was it.
Oh, that was it?
Yeah, the other part, I think we kind of already took care of. I mean, I was actually opposed to D, E, F, G, and H being there altogether, because I think, to Alan's point, I think it initially the thought was it was too much. But I guess Dan kind of gave some explanations and examples why it might be a good idea. I thought it was just a lot of unnecessary gathering of.
Yeah, and I was always, as I was going through this, I was thinking of Joyce's point of trying to make it simple.
Correct.
It's a lot to read.
It is a lot.
I mean, someone, if we're directing this towards the haulers, then they should be able to read this and understand it.
Yeah.
Because it's the business they're in. I got confused when I'm thinking that we're directing this towards the residents that are gonna hire a dumpster to do a renovation project or to clean out a house.
Yeah.
Who would have to read through this and understand it.
Yes.
But if we're putting it on the people that are actually in the business, this should be like reading the newspaper for them. They should understand this because it's their
Unless
business.
you're, have the initial MM.
And then,
Come on.
oh, God.
She's on his truck in the steakhouse. Yep.
Yeah,
So if somebody does ask for a permit, because they're doing reconstruction, I get it in Viewpoint, it's E.L. Harvey. I'm going after the residents saying you need to supply a permit application
no,
to get the dumpster or not?
No, because Javi is that license to haul in town, and they're licensed to haul everything.
Right, so that's all our trash people then.
Right. It's gonna be that red dog, like I would say it could be like a small roofing company that is gonna supply their own company-owned dumpster
Okay,
to strip a roof.
okay,
They have to comply by this, and they would come in and they would pull a C&D permit, a temporary C&D permit.
but still have to fill out their insurance of $1 million and all that other stuff.
Because I'm trying to think, who is it? There's a roofing company, the roofer, right?
Yeah, I've seen
Now
that.
they have their own dumpsters, I believe. But because they come in and pull permits.
I haven't seen them come across me yet.
Oh, really? Because I've seen them come in quite a few times.
the roofer.
But
You don't
Yeah.
have them as a.
not the ROOFA.
And
Yeah, I see.
yeah,
the
but
sign
maybe
up all the
that's
time.
because we don't have temporary C&D permits, but now we do. Maybe. I know I've seen them in, and I believe they have their own dumpster trailers.
Well, shit, if they're coming in, then the line about who they're using for a dumpster.
I
swear it's there.
Yeah. Well, Jenny Gardner at the library. I mean, the town hall, he's got his own dumpster. It's on wheels. He's parked at the town hall forever.
The office side?
Yeah, it's a very small one, but it's what they call a dump trailer.
Where was that one?
Danny Gardner had it parked between the police station and the town hall for a long time. Was putting construction debris in it.
Oh, it was open top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a dumpster trailer. It's a dump trailer.
Correct, yeah, that was
And
the
it's-
stuff they were putting all the.
There's a
They were cleaning up, filling the hole and stuff. There's that thing right there, and
Well, I know the E.L. Harvey one, but I haven't seen another one there before.
I didn't notice the name, was it not ELI? Something else,
it's not very big. It's probably the size of this table.
and it was sitting on the back end, so it was that the one on the back end, so if you walk around the back of the building, that one?
No, it was right near the wheelchair ramp. that goes up to the first floor.
Oh, yes. Oh, up there at the front.
I mean, technically, that's a temporary
Yes.
trailer. I mean, it's registered to be on the road as a trailer, but
Right, that's
it's
right.
a dump trailer.
Okay.
Because I have one. I have a bigger one.
Right.
And when I got involved with the town, the Board of Health, I saw that as I was reading the rules, I needed to pull an awful permit if I was gonna haul people's trash.
Yeah,
I stopped hauling.
nothing.
They have a microwave here too at the gallon.
Ooh. This is wonderful, Tom. I don't know how you know I missed dinner.
Oh.
Well, I think, you know. Plus I noticed too, do we have anybody on? Was that,
Well, one woman, she lasted a half hour, she's like,
it was just the one person.
you know,
I was kind of stated if we should pause to say, is anybody listening?
Yes, yeah, I didn't even notice. In the past, I've seen an icon that has alerted me that someone's on.
Right.
I'm catching on to how this all works. But I think hopefully we have it. It's just a matter of what the permit application is gonna look like. And I liked the one that Upton used. And, you know, to follow along with you, I wasn't trying to make money at this. Because let's face it, if the trash hauling company is gonna have to pay for a permit, they're gonna pass it on to the home,
Cool.
you know? So I'm not trying to blow anything up, and I certainly don't want to, put a burden on all the people that have what I'll call permanent dumpsters in town, you know, the businesses and things like that. We're not trying to, you know, add to their expense.
How does this affect, since we are talking about? The assumption here is that every business in town currently has a permitted provider, right?
Right. Well,
So we know that for sure.
when I,
probably not that.
when I used the town of Upton's permit, I didn't alter anything till I got to the bottom. And they have commercial permit 25 a year. And I want to have no fee for a commercial dumpster. And then residential permit was 25. They had it for 90 days. I was going to 60 instead of the 90.
You know, actually, when I heard you mention that earlier, actually when Dan was talking about the up and you said 90, I began to think, because he also commented on how long construction can go. But geez, is 60 really too short? Because, I mean, you probably know, construction work, you know, unless you're doing a quick remodel or something, it can go.
But we have a 30-day extension.
No, like if you're doing like a renovation.
Yeah.
Or in addition to a home.
Mhm.
I could see that easy going potentially 90 days. But on in addition to a home.
Right, but if we have 60 days for our standard and we offer a 30-day extension at no additional cost, you just have to tell us you need 30 more days.
No, what I'm getting at is I just didn't know when Dan started to talk about how long construction projects can go. If 60 was really a good reasonable basis, if the basis should not have been 90 with an extension of 30.
Yeah, I think the problem with going with 90,
Then you get to Joyce's point about
it
Not-
seems like it's
not
been there
forcing it.
forever.
Yeah,
Sitting
Things
longer than
move
you-
along. Now, at the end of 90 days, if you want to come back and start it all over again, it's only $25.
or do you want to go to the 5? All right, we'll give you an extension, it's like, you want an extension for 30, do you want 60, or do you want to check box other? And they asked the Board of Health, I want it for another 4 months.
Yeah,
We write in 4 months.
yeah, I think we need to discourage that.
Okay,
I think that's when the neighbors start to get ticked off, like you get those people down on Catalpa.
Which one's Catalpa?
Catalpa is the one off of Thayer,
Which one is
Bellingham. Well, we've been getting complaints from a resident about a dumpster and the juice falling out of the dumpster, and it's been there forever.
Oh, yes, that one. And the one that Andy actually went and checked out one time.
He
Said
may
he
have.
found no problem.
Yeah, he may have.
I think
I
it's the one that they were actually
vaguely remember
emptying it.
that.
They were doing it, that was one, I think they were actually doing it on the street. And then I think the guy eventually then put it back into his property.
Okay.
And I think that's the one where Andy went to check it one time.
I've never
He
been
saw-
down there.
He saw no issues. This is going back, let's say about a year. Memory, roughly the time frame.
I think even more,
More than,
because the
Okay.
people have complained. I think they may have even sent
it was a while ago.
they may have even sent an audio of the noise of the
Yeah.
construction going on down there.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
think they even might have sent pictures.
And it's too bad, that they can't seem to work it out amongst the neighbors, whatever's going on down there.
Well, that's why we're here.
Yeah. That's why I carry
I mean,
a big bat.
Get a gun, just get a gun. This is why you have government.
Well,
Well, it's
yes,
stupid and not justifiable government. I mean, this is what promotes. This is why
Regulations.
government gets so big,
Yeah.
and then people piss and moan. Well, if you freaking people could
Get along.
get along, then what happens is government institutes all these guidelines, and, but it actually, what it does is it actually takes away some freedoms.
right.
And then now you have no choice but to go to the government agency that something created
Yeah.
that probably did need to be created if only society went to figure it out better.
Exactly.
Anyway. So now you're gonna type this all up? This is all gonna be ready again
No, I didn't have anything in this.
tomorrow night? So this version that we talked about.
Well, now you're gonna give it to Dan for his review.
All right, okay, so this won't be talked
No,
about.
no, what we talked about, like, just saying, hey, we had a meeting.
Okay, just an update.
Yeah,
It's not- it's nothing.
Yeah,
Well, thanks.
somehow we need to get this to the finish line.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, closer.
Tonight
And
was a
it,
great
and
day.
and it's hard. I mean, I appreciate everybody willing to come to an extra meeting
Oh, yeah.
to try to get this, get this accomplished, but we gotta get to the finish line and then, I'm all for an annual review. Or, as things come up, if something comes up that, it says that we need to change something, then we'll have to change something. Now, it's my understanding we're gonna have to have a town meeting to get this. Right, we have to have like.
Public hearing.
Public
Okay,
hearing.
that's what it is.
And I think that's all that's required is a notice probably at the town hall board. They're gonna lobby like we talked about earlier, because I don't know if you had heard, by the way, town crier is at the moment out of circulation.
No,
Yes.
I knew that he passed away, but,
Then he said Maryland apparently is in nursing, and no
no,
one seems to want to take over.
because I know my wife had some interaction with the girl that's the new editor. And my wife said she was fabulous.
Yeah, it's, what's her face from Oxbridge?
Yeah, nice young lady.
She's been a reporter for years covering the beat. Michelle Sanford.
Okay.
Yeah, she took over the editing.
Hmm,
But she needs to take over town right now.
So, yeah, this Maryland wants to take over the paper.
Because on the website, they're not publishing anything for September or October.
So Jack raised the question, what do we do for things like the flu clinic that we want to advertise? And hazardous waste day, I gave him some
Yeah.
suggestions like minimum posted on the bulletin board in the lobby of the town hall. And then we sit social media,
hmm,
put it on our website, put it on the town's Facebook page,
school department.
school department, yep, and then things like that. So that would be a great one, because that probably then can link with the moms and dads.
Right.
General Facebook, the town one is very popular. So yeah, so getting into the school is key. Now it's all the parents, and that's gonna hit the majority of people right there.
What's the date of that?
I'm working on October 18th, I think it is.
Yeah, why did I have October 19th? Okay,
What day of the week is that?
I got mine this morning at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
In CVS, painless.
Yeah.
My wife was she's getting a little nervous. Tuesday. Okay, and my wife said, I'm gonna go online to CVS and see what it is, and they had an opening for 6 a.m. this morning, so I went down there this morning. I think my wife's going tomorrow morning at 8. Just to get it done.
You want to make a motion?
Have another piece of, my motion to adjourn the meeting.
I stepped down in second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, meeting's adjourned.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.